Welcome to the DoughRoller Money Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Berger, and today in episode 208, we're going to talk about Vanguard's investment advisory services. It's a service that Vanguard offers in exchange for 30 basis points. Vanguard will manage your investments. And it's a service I've mentioned a number of times, mentioned it in the last episode as a service I've suggested that my wife use to manage our investments should I get hit by a truck. And today we have a special guest on the show from Vanguard. I'll tell you about him in just a minute, but he's going to talk to us about the services that Vanguard offers. During the Daily Dough, we're going to be talking about a concept called the internal locus of control. Big words, I know. It's something I've been reading about. It's a concept that actually helps the Marines make Marines, and it can help us in our personal finances, our investments, our careers, our business, really in every aspect of our lives. So we're going to talk about the internal locus of control during the Daily Dough. And then to round out the show, have a question that was actually left on the DoughRoller Facebook group. It's I guess a private group, if you will, but you all can join. Just go to DoughRoller.net/Facebook group if you'd like to join. It's a very active group of folks trying to make the most of their money. And someone left a question on there about whether you should roll over a 401k to an IRA when you leave your job. It's actually a question that I'm now confronting, and so I thought it would be a great question to address. And in fact, I didn't have to do much work on this one because the other folks who are members of the Facebook group, they jumped in and answered this person's question, and I couldn't have answered it any better than they did. So in some ways, I'm just going to be sharing with you the hard work of others, and I love that. All right, so let's get started. We're going to begin with, we have a great guest on the show. His name is Frank Calamago. He is in charge of Vanguard's investment advisory services. Frank, welcome to the show.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. I talk a lot about Vanguard and the investment advisory services. I tell my listeners if I ever get hit by a truck, I've asked my wife to hire you guys to manage our investments. So I'm thrilled to have you on the show. Why don't you just give the listeners sort of a little idea of who you are and what you do there at Vanguard?
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Frank Calamago, and I head up the retail advice business here at Vanguard. I've been with the company for about 20 years now, and in my role, I oversee the teams of advisors who provide advice through our newest service that we call Personal Advisor Services.
All right. And that's really the focus today. If someone wanted to consider and perhaps use Vanguard's investment advisory services, and they call in, kind of walk us through the process. What would be the first thing that would happen?
Sure. The first thing that would happen is that we would work with the client to get them an investor questionnaire. It's really a pretty straightforward questionnaire, about 15 questions, and that would help them to describe things such as their goals, the risk tolerance, a little bit of background about their situation. And that information then becomes the catalyst for us to create a financial plan for the client. So we would look at that information, we would put it into our models, we would actually have a conversation with them, and we would really probe and drill down a bit and really understand what their objectives are, make sure we fully grasp what their objectives are. And then we would actually produce a financial plan for them. And we would set up another conversation to review that with the client. And we would set up an asset allocation. And at that point, if the conversation led to a desire to enter into an ongoing advised relationship, then we would put that in place and begin to work with the client on an ongoing basis and provide them with the advisory service.
So I take it the financial plan that you've described is put together by a CFP, a certified financial planner at Vanguard?
Yeah, the majority of our advisors do have that certified financial planning designation, or they're working towards it. In our personal advisor services group, we have presently about 350 advisors as part of the team.
Wow. And so if someone were to sign up for this, would they be assigned one of those individuals to their accounts?
They would. Everybody works with an advisor on an ongoing relationship. It's a key part of the service. And what we do is at a break point of about $500,000 in assets and above, you have an ongoing dedicated advisor, more of a team-based approach for investors who come in at the entry point for our service, which is $50,000 up to that $500,000, and then beyond that, it's an ongoing named relationship of an advisor that the person would work with.
Okay, so $50,000 is the minimum in order to use Vanguard's advisory services.
That's correct.
And once you get hit above $500,000, you're actually assigned sort of a dedicated representative to work with.
Correct.
Right.
But each person, so when you're coming in, for example, if you're at the lower asset level, you would work with a named person, though, to set up that plan and to go through those initial consultations and to do really the deep conversations that take place to ensure that the investor has a well-grounded plan as part of the opportunity to work with Vanguard on an ongoing basis. And
can those minimums, say the $50,000, can that be spread over, say, a taxable account of whatever $40,000 and an IRA of $10,000? Can you combine accounts if they're going to both go under the advisory services umbrella?
Yeah. Yes, Rob, you certainly can, and we would look at all different sources, both taxable, tax-deferred type relationships as part of that holistic picture. And that's one of the benefits of personal advisor is that we are looking at a variety of account types and a variety of goals for the investor to make sure that we give them custom, comprehensive financial planning advice.
Right. So I take it when you put together an asset allocation plan, in addition to stocks versus bonds and those other things maybe we'll talk about in a minute, are you also looking at asset location between tax-advantaged accounts and taxable accounts?
Absolutely. We're considering all that when we structure portfolios. One of the goals is to make sure we give our clients in these advised relationships tax-efficient advice. So we're considering all those different structures to make sure that it's in the best interest of the end client.
Right. And I take it this will be the dumbest question I'll ask in the interview, at least probably, but I'm going to ask it anyway, Frank. When you implement the asset allocation plan, is it fair to say that you implement it only with Vanguard mutual funds or ETFs?
We really do recommend Vanguard funds as part of when we're constructing a well-balanced, diversified portfolio for our clients. We do that for a few reasons, as you can imagine. One is that the Vanguard funds have very low fees. They're very well diversified. At the end of the day, they're best-in-class offerings. We do have the ability, though, to consider non-Vanguard holdings as part of the portfolio if, for example, let's say that an investor had a large embedded capital gain. We wouldn't want to sell that out necessarily and incur that gain prematurely. So we can work around situations like that and consider it as part of the overall asset allocation. When it comes to recommending funds, we do recommend Vanguard funds as part of the service.
And I guess that raises another question for me. Let's say someone comes to you and they've got a lot of Vanguard assets, but they also have a 401k at whatever, Fidelity, that they obviously can't move. Let's assume they're still employed there. They can't transition it. Will you factor that in terms of the overall asset allocation plan that you'll put in place for the Vanguard assets?
We can take a big picture view and look across different asset and plan types, whether they're held at Vanguard or held away, in thinking about the holistic recommendation that we're going to provide. But as you articulated there, we wouldn't have the ability to actually manage that portfolio. And we can help the client input those into the plan so that they're aware of it and they can see it as part of the picture, but they would have to continue to manage those different components on their own.
And I take it then, so after someone calls up, they go through this process, they actually get a physical, maybe it's emailed to them, I don't know, but a physical financial plan, written asset allocation plan. Here's the result of this sort of initial few consultations and initial work.
That's correct. They do receive the comprehensive financial plan, and we try to frame things in a way that really speaks to the investor's goals. So many of the individuals who enter into these advised relationships, that main goal is retirement. But we can also provide information on other goals. For example, if it's a college savings strategy or someone who's desiring to purchase a vacation home, for example. And so when we provide that financial plan, it's showing the asset allocation, outlooks in success of likelihood to be able to reach that goal. And that becomes the foundation and the information that we use to help the client monitor progress and performance over time.
Okay. And so once this, an asset allocation plan is set and the client agrees with it, I take it, by the way, the client can have all kinds of input into this. You've recommended 70% stocks. I'd prefer 75. I mean, I assume this is a dialogue between the client and Vanguard.
Yeah, there's absolutely a give and take that takes place, and we want to make sure through that process. And in fact, this is a great aspect of the service that while it has a great deal of sophisticated technology behind it, it's really more than just an algorithm. This is an opportunity to work with a skilled, knowledgeable financial counselor to be able to make sure that we understand what truly is your risk tolerance and how do things reflect your goals and your objectives? And so it's very much a partnership and a dialogue and a conversation.
And do you typically implement the investment plan with mutual funds or ETFs, or does it just vary depending on the circumstances?
It tends to vary, but for the majority presently, a lot of it is we're finding is Vanguard mutual funds. And in fact, that's the Vanguard Admiral share class of mutual funds. So it's a low-fee retail class that, roughly weighted average is about 10 basis points. And what we're finding is many of the initial investors in Personal Advisor are actually Vanguard clients, many of whom already hold Vanguard mutual funds.
Yeah.
So while we see the mutual funds being used in the program, we certainly can accommodate the ETFs as well.
Right. And then I take it once the plan is set up, the investments are transitioned if they need to be, Vanguard does the rebalancing.
That's correct. We do ongoing rebalancing.
And what exactly does that mean, ongoing?
Yeah, so we look at each individual's portfolio. They can get a real-time view every day through their personalized web experience. But every 90 days, we would look at the investor's portfolio and say, have they moved outside of the guardrails and the thresholds that we have in place? And at that 90-day anniversary for each client, we would make a determination systematically whether a rebalance is warranted to get them back to the proper strategic asset allocation. And if that were the case, we would then move them back.
Has Vanguard published anything on exactly how they do that, what the guardrails are, how far off an asset class has to be before the rebalance?
We have that as part of our investment methodology, and we would be certainly happy to provide that to you if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm kind of a geek when it comes to rebalancing, but I don't know that we need to dive into the weeds. But yeah, that would be great, and I can share it with the listeners. So if someone signs up for this and they move forward, is there any commitment time-wise, or can they leave the advisory services anytime that they want to?
They can leave whenever they want to. We hope to keep them well satisfied, but there is certainly an opportunity to terminate the service if they choose to do so for whatever reason.
Okay, and I take it for those entering retirement, you help them with a distribution plan and required minimum distributions and which funds they should take from and how all that should work?
Absolutely. That's a key part of the service as well, and many of our clients are coming to us. It's interesting. I'd say roughly 2/3 of our clients are coming to us in that age 55 to 75-year-old age range. So using, say, age 65 as a proxy for retirement, we have many clients that are working with us to prepare for retirement, and we have many clients that are in retirement. And we can help work with them on those tax-efficient drawdown strategies and give them the assistance with things they need, such as their annual RMD distribution.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. I mean, in some ways, the investing part of it while you're working is the easy part, although it doesn't always seem that way. It's taking the money out in a smart way that kind of gets challenging. So do you have a service, and I've been with Vanguard forever, so I should probably know this, but do you have a service? What if someone said, I really like the idea of a financial plan and you sitting down with me and looking at my investments, and do I have the investments in the right types of accounts and all that sort of thing, but I'm not sure I'm ready for you guys to take over the management of the investments yet. Do you have that sort of, financial planning service that you offer for those that don't want the investment advisory services?
I'd say through the onboarding consultation process for Personal Advisor, we effectively are delivering the opportunity to have that type of consultation. And as we work through the creation of the financial plan, there's really no commitment to sign up. You can still have that conversation, and we hope that the investors will see the value as they work through it and as we review the financial plan that we've created with their input. But if an investor is not ready to move forward yet, there's no obligation to consent to the ongoing advice. They can get some value through those consultations, and then hopefully when they're ready and see the merits of the ongoing relationship and all they'll get when they come on board, whether it's the ongoing access to the web tools, the ongoing relationship with the Vanguard financial advisor, but it's certainly their choice when and if to move forward.
Okay. All right. That's great. One last question for you. You mentioned the $50,000 minimum. You mentioned getting a dedicated advisor going forward at $500,000. Are there any other sort of perks, if you will, that you get at other dollar amounts, whatever it's $1 million or $5 million? Are there any other things that sort of trigger when you get to those other higher levels?
Well, I'd say that probably the one thing, I'm not sure if we mentioned it in our conversation, was that we have a 30 basis point flat fee for the service. So that would be something to keep in mind, that the ongoing fee for the advisory service, and basically for all of the access to the sophisticated technology, the financial planner, and the like, would all be offered through that 30 basis points.
And I guess we should mention the cost, shouldn't we? I talk about it so often, I kind of just, 30 basis points and I move on. Is that 30 basis points regardless whether you've got $50,000 invested in the advisory services or $10 million? It's 30 basis points?
We do offer some different pricing differentials at significant asset levels, but for the sake of the personal advisor service that we're talking about here, 30 basis points would be the price point for the majority of the investors.
Okay. Well, Frank, I really appreciate your time today. Is there any aspects of the personal advisor services we haven't covered that people should know about? Yeah,
I think we've generally covered the main features of the services. Again, I mentioned that we have about 300 advisors at Vanguard, and a terrific team that's well educated. Majority hold that certified financial planning designation, and I think the value that comes from these individuals, and you think about the current market conditions that we've been operating under, which have been incredibly volatile. The behavioral coaching aspect that the advisor can provide is a real value add for the service. Again, I go back to the algorithms and the formulas are great, but it's that personalized awareness and knowledge that the advisor can bring to the relationship. And at times when maybe people are being tested a bit with fluctuating markets, the advisor can play a tremendous role and add great value to help someone stay the course and focus on the long term and really go back to those assumptions that we worked on together to help create a long-term plan. And ultimately, through our research, we've shown that the ability to stay the course can often be one of the biggest determinants for success going forward.
Yeah, I imagine you guys were getting a lot of calls in January.
We got quite a few, and it's why we're here, and we love those calls because when markets are great, we all enjoy that, but the value of the advisor really comes into play in periods like the ones we've just experienced.
Yeah. Okay, so if someone wants to sort of get started or learn more, I can leave your phone number, the Vanguard's phone number, in the show notes. I take it that's the first step, just to give you guys a call?
Sure, that's great, and they can do a little bit of research on Vanguard.com as well. They'll be able to easily find information on personal advisor services.
Right. Oh, great. All right, Frank, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciated being here today.
Well, a big thank you to Frank and the folks at Vanguard for making that interview possible. Hopefully, you found it informative. If you're interested in checking out their investment advisory services, you can give Vanguard a call. Okay, on to the Daily Dough. As I mentioned, it's this whole internal locus of control. I know, a strange term, at least it was for me. Where in the world did I come up with it? Well, I didn't come up with it on my own, I can tell you that. So I've been reading a book called Smarter, Faster, Better. It's by Charles Duhigg. He wrote The Power of Habit, which is a book I've talked about in the past, one that I very much enjoyed. And in the very first chapter of his new book, Smarter, Faster, Better, he talks about this concept of locus of control, and I wanted to mention it to you. And it comes, his introduction to it actually comes through the Marines. He talks about it in the context of boot camp, and of course, my son went through Parris Island a little over a year ago. So I guess I had as close of a I guess it wasn't firsthand, secondhand experience with Parris Island. Obviously, there's a big difference between talking to your son who went through it and going through it yourself. But I got a kind of a good sense of what it's like and what it's like to be a Marine, at least as good as I think one can get without actually joining the Marines. And so this really caught my attention when I was reading it in Duhigg's book, and he talked about a fellow named Krulak, and I hope I've pronounced it right, but he was a Marine who sort of redesigned boot camp some time ago. And let me just read you a short excerpt from Charles Duhigg's book. He says, Krulak began reviewing studies on how to teach self-motivation and became particularly intrigued by research conducted by the Corps years earlier, showing that the most successful Marines were those with a strong internal locus of control, a belief they could influence their destiny through the choices they made. Locus of control has been a major topic of study within psychology since the 1950s. Researchers have found that people with an internal locus of control tend to praise or blame themselves for success or failure rather than assigning responsibility to things outside their influence. A student with a strong internal locus of control, for instance, will attribute good grades to hard work rather than natural smarts. A salesman with an internal locus of control will blame a lost sale on his own lack of hustle rather than bad fortune. Internal locus of control has been linked with academic success, higher self-motivation and social maturity, lower incidences of stress and depression, and longer lifespan. Well, there you go. And I started to think about this in the context of personal finance and investing. The reality is there's a lot of things that happen in our lives that are at least at some level outside of our control, right? I mean, that's just life. But occasionally I'll run into someone and they ask me what I do. I mention I've got a personal finance blog and podcast, and they want to immediately talk about personal finance and investing, which is wonderful. I like talking about personal finance and investing. And they'll say something along the lines of, I really should be saving more. I just can't save anymore. And I'll start to engage them on that. I say, really? Well, tell me about that. And I make okay money, but got a family, got the car payments, and I'll start asking them questions. Well, really, what kind of car do you drive? Oh, I got a nice pickup truck, or I've got a car, $30,000 car, and I ask them about their spending habits, and how many times do you eat out a week? Oh, 3 or 4 times, and we'll kind of go like this for a while, and what I'll try to do as politely as I can, and particularly since they brought this up, I don't volunteer it, is to say, look, you have more control than you think you do. Don't allow yourself to think that you don't have control over your spending. Certainly in some extreme cases, you may not. But I think for many people, at least that I encounter, they have far more control over their spending and their finances than they think they do. And the point isn't that they shouldn't have the car that they have, or that they shouldn't eat out. Those are personal choices. That's none of my business. That's your choice. That's their choice. But don't on the one hand spend your money that way, and on the other hand say, I can't save. It's just not true. And you're really robbing yourself of a tremendous power when you do that. You're taking a sort of a perspective of an external locus of control. These external events are forcing you to make certain decisions when in fact they're not. Now, frankly, a lot of times it makes us feel better to think that way, because then we don't have to take responsibility for the choices that we make. And, I try not to come off as I don't know what the word is, but I try not to come off so gruff, I suppose, in my conversation with folks. And we only go down this path when they bring it up. And, but the thing is, I try to apply that same type of thinking to my own life. I mean, there are times when I do the same thing and want to sort of blame external sources for an investment maybe that goes bad, or in the world of the practicing law, a case didn't go well. That was the judge, and he or she didn't know what they were doing, or the jury. Can you believe that jury? They'll do anything, and who knows? And that's fine, and that's true, but. Really what I should be thinking is, what could I have done differently? Yes, juries can be unpredictable, so can judges. That's life. And if it's always something external happening to us, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to learn and to improve and to get better. And that was really, I think, the point that Charles Duhigg was making in his book. And I wanted to share it with you for the Daily Dough. I think it's something that, frankly, we can all get better at. I know I can. And I think it's empowering when we take an internal locus of control perspective on the things that are going on in our lives, even those things that are heavily influenced by other people and other circumstances. So there you go. All right, on to the question of the day. The question comes from a listener named Russell, and as I mentioned at the top of the show, he actually asked this in the Facebook group. Again, DoughRoller.net/Facebook group. And here was his question. He says, I've got a 401k from a prior job and a 401k from a current employer. Between the two, I've got all the funds I need with good fee structures, but I keep hearing roll the old 401k into an IRA. This seems like a bad idea if I plan to retire between 55 and 59 and a half, as my current plan is to merge the two just prior to leaving my employer, so I'll have access to those funds without doing a 72T. Am I missing something? Well, great question. And some of you may be thinking, yeah, it might be a good question, but I didn't follow it all. So here's the deal. With 401ks, if you're at your job, you have a 401k. Once you turn 55, you have options for if you turn 55 and then retire, you have options for using the money that's in the 401k. At that point, you don't have to wait until you're 59 and a half, and you can still use the money and avoid the 10% penalty. And in response, there were some excellent answers or replies to Russell's question. The first one, I'm going to actually mention two. The first one was from a listener named Sebastian. Sebastian said, actually gave several reasons why not rolling the 401k into an IRA would be preferable. Of course, one that wasn't mentioned is this idea of using the money when you retire at age 55. That doesn't apply to an IRA. And that's, I think, implicit in Russell's question. But Sebastian had some other points. He said 401k plans have strong creditor protections, while IRA protections depend on state law. Very true. Again, that may not be an issue for everybody, but I mean, if you've got good investments in a 401k, why not take the benefit of strong creditor protections? Number two, rolling into an IRA may diminish the tax efficiency of a backdoor Roth contributions, forcing you to pay pro rata taxes. Another great point. We've talked about it a lot in past episodes, but in case you're new to that, with a backdoor Roth, for those that don't qualify for a Roth because of their income, you can contribute after-tax money to a regular IRA and then immediately convert it to a Roth. You won't pay any taxes on the conversion because you'd already paid taxes on the money. It was after-tax contributions. And now your money can grow tax-free in a Roth, even though your income disqualifies you to contribute sort of the normal way, if you will, to a Roth. And the problem, though, is if you have other pre-tax IRAs, you can't convert one IRA over here and say, yeah, I've got these pre-tax IRAs in this other account. I'm going to ignore those. I'm just going to convert this after-tax IRA. The Internal Revenue Services views all of your IRAs, with some exceptions, as sort of one bucket. Doesn't matter if they're in separate accounts. Doesn't even matter if they're at separate brokerages. You could have one at Fidelity, one at Vanguard, and one at Betterment. And it really doesn't matter. Separating them like that doesn't help you. And so if you keep your money in 401ks, and the only IRA you have is the one you're going to use for this back door, you don't have to worry about the pro rata taxes. So that's an important point. Again, if you're interested in a backdoor Roth. And then he also said if you have a really sweet 401k, you could end up paying higher fees in your IRA, even with Vanguard. Now that's interesting. That is theoretically true, although I would argue there are very few 401ks where the fees are less than, say, an index fund at Vanguard. However, there is one that comes to mind, the Thrift Savings Plan, the TSP. So if you're a government employee in the military, that's a good example where he's absolutely right. Now, you might say the difference isn't that significant. It's not, but that being said, why would you choose to pay more, even if it's only a couple of basis points? By the way, just as an aside, it drives me crazy when I see financial advisors who want to manage your money in an IRA recommend that you get out of the TSP when you retire. And there are some companies that actually have constructed these elaborate reasons why you should move your TSP money into an IRA with them, and it just drives me batty. So if you got your money in a low-cost 401k, and you've got a financial advisor saying, "Oh, that's no good, transfer it to an IRA," you better really question him or her, and I would even argue get a second opinion. I'm not saying there could never be a reason to do that, but you've really got to, think about what their motivations are. If you've got something like the TSP, which is a phenomenal, low-cost way to invest. And then the other thing that Sebastian said was, the only thing I'd consider is whether you'd be better off, even just due to simplicity, rolling your old 401k into the new one immediately. It depends on the plan details and your specific situation, whether that is better. But another great point, you can roll an old 401k into a new 401k at your current employer, again, assuming the new plan permits it. I suspect most do, but you'd need to check with your employer. Now, he went on, he said, the two biggest reasons that I would 100% roll over to an IRA are, one, of course, high fees in the 401k. And for regular listeners of the DoughRoller Money Podcast, that should be a no-brainer, right? And then he goes on, though, second, if you have a Roth 401k before age 70 and a half, should be rolled into a Roth IRA, because Roth IRAs are not currently, ! Subject to required minimum distributions, but Roth 401ks are. Now, that's a pretty fine point that he's making. So Sebastian must be a retirement account ninja, okay? But it's absolutely, that's my understanding as well, a Roth 401k, there's a RMDs, required minimum distributions, with a Roth IRA, there's not. And he said currently, ! And the reason he said that is there have been some proposals in Washington to change that rule, but it hasn't been changed as of yet, at least as far as I know. I think he's spot on there. So, this is just a great example of, I think, how wonderful the Facebook group has proven to be. Great questions, people, coming in with great responses. And I wanted to share that with you. Now, the other one I wanted to mention is a listener named Lori. She linked to an article, and you can check it out if you go to the Facebook group and join it, DoughRoller.net/Facebook group. But it's an article that talks about 5 things you can do in an IRA that you can't do in a 401k. And so in this sense, there may be circumstances where you do want to roll it over, because there are some things you want to do that you just can't do with a 401k. One of them, make qualified charitable distributions, which may or may not be important to you, but then again, it might be, or penalty-free distributions for higher education expenses. So this is a perfect example where there's just not one right answer. It's another example of how just insane the IRS and our tax code is. I mean, we can thank it's really not the IRS's fault. They don't pass the laws; they just enforce them. But just how crazy and complicated something that should be simple. This shouldn't be that complicated. Unfortunately, it is, and so you have to. You have to weigh the pros and cons, and if you have a particularly difficult situation or set of circumstances and you're not sure, you should seek professional advice. Talk to a CFP or a knowledgeable accountant or other tax or retirement account professional, and get some advice, because this can get complicated. But it was a great question. I wanted to share it with you, and I guess kind of promote the Facebook group, because it's worked out to be great. And so there you go. Well, listen. Hope you have a wonderful day and a great week. I will be back next week with another show. Now that I'm quote unquote retired, I got no excuses, remember? And looking forward to it. Have a great day. And remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.